Otherwise, you can study for a moment outside that. Okay, so all limit questions, you need to train yourself to first start off with direct substitution. Unfortunately, for this question, the numerator goes to 0, the denominator goes to 0, and so anytime you have 0 over 0, that's when you're going to have more work. But if it wasn't 0 over 0, then we would be just about finished already. So when you look at this, there has to be a list of things that you consider when you have indeterminate form. Sometimes you have to simplify a complex fraction. Sometimes you have to factor. Sometimes you need to substitute a trig identity. Sometimes anything that's algebra related is technically fair game. But for this particular one, none of that stuff helps. But one of the things on your list needs to be multiplying by a conjugate. And you would pick the conjugate of the denominator because it's the one with the square root piece. It's going to be a way to make that square root simplify nicely. Okay, so then in our numerator, we've got x minus 2 times this stuff. And that's not going to simplify nicely, so just leave it as is. But your denominator is going to have a lot happen, because anytime you multiply something by its conjugate, a lot of stuff simplifies. And this is why we use conjugates. So first part of FOIL would be 1 times 1. The outer part of FOIL would be this. The inner part of FOIL would be this. And then the last part of FOIL, the square root of 3x minus 5 times the square root of 3x minus 5 would be 3x minus 5. But one's positive and one's negative, so that means that whole thing's negative. Now, anytime you multiply something by its conjugate, I usually skip this step and don't show this step because the outer and inner always cancel out and go to 0. So that's a little bit of a shortcut, if you know that. And to finish this question, we need to finish with direct substitution, but there's no point of even trying to plug this 2 back in until something from the numerator has canceled out something from the denominator. So right now I have this for my denominator. Well, I could simplify this by combining like terms. 5 plus 1 is 6. And then if I know something needs to cancel, this is looking kind of like this. If I considered factoring out a 3, now x minus 2 can cancel out x minus 2. And now that something's canceled from the numerator and denominator, we can try direct substitution again. So in the top, I'm going to plug in a 2 in for x, and in the bottom I would plug in 2 for x also, but there's no x's left in the denominator. So we get 1 plus the square root of 6 minus 5, which would be the square root of 1, which is 1, which is where I came up with negative 2/3. Is there something more specific in there, or is that enough? It's okay. Anybody else that was going to ask about number 8 need to ask something specific about the work before it's off the board? I know multiplying conjugates not the type of algebra that you've done the most, but as long as you know when to, then you're just multiplying fractions after that point. One of them's always a conjugate, so it cleans up quicker than you would think it would. The other one's messy, but you leave it alone until it cancels out. Okay.